Hi Rinki, good evening. How are you?
Hi Manish, good evening. I'm good. How are you?
Yeah, I'm good too. So let's start the interview process and let me tell you about myself as well. So I'm currently handling the DevOps department here for last 8 years, and my team works on AWS Cloud, Docker, Kubernetes, CI/CD part like Jenkins, GitHub Actions. Also for the APM tools, we are using the Grafana. We have also used Elk, and we are parallelly using the Splunk and Dynatrace as well. So these are kind of tools and technology what we are using, like including GCP as well. So let's start with your introduction as well.
Thanks, Manish. That's good to know that you and your team are using that much tech stacks. I hope I would also get a chance to work on all those skills. So, as per my experience, I have almost 5 years of experience in DevOps, and I have got the chance to get my hands dirty in almost all the technologies that you've just talked about. So I have experience in Docker, Kubernetes. Like I can write the YAML files for the deployment, the ingress files, your service files, like everything I can set up. And in Dockerization, I can also help developers to write the Docker files. And apart from Docker containerization, I have experience in AWS Cloud, specifically worked with AWS Cloud only. So I'm familiar with many services in AWS, like your VPC, EC2, your RDS, Cloud Virtual Arms, like I've set up myself, and some other stuff like Route 53 for managing the domain names and all, and might be any other service also. I might have forgotten the name as of now. So apart from AWS Cloud and CI/CD, I have hands-on with GitHub as of now. I'm working on GitHub Actions in my current company and have worked with Jenkins as well in previous companies and GitLab also. So one more thing I missed. In if I talk about IAC, I have worked with Terraform. So for Terraform, I have like written modules for you can say EC2, RDS, and mainly these things for setting up the VPC networking things, and on top of that, your RDS and applications in EC2. So this thing I have like worked on as of now.
Okay, that's great to hear. So let's start with the AWS itself and let's start with the EC2 that you mentioned all the AWS services. So suppose your application is running on EC2 instance and your application is experiencing high traffic, like it's a kind of a spike which happens during the business hours. So how will you handle this kind of situation?
Okay, so it's like my application is on EC2, and in some business hours, it has some spikes. I guess I'm assuming that these spikes are related to CPU and RAM. So, depending on the situation, I guess it is better to have auto scaling group and load balancers configured for this type of application, for which we have certain spikes in RAM and CPU. Let us say if, in a particular business hour, let us say around uh, 3 p.m. in the like afternoon, let us say the business goes high. So during that particular time when the CPU and RAM usage are high, then depending upon the configuration of this CPU and RAM in our auto scaling group, the EC2 machines will expand, like will scale up. There would be more EC2 machines to handle the load. And in the off business hours, the same EC2s can scale down. That is, the number of EC2s will actually scale down, will actually decrease in number. So it will save us cost as well. So this is auto scaling. But to distribute the load among those increased number of EC2s, we can configure load balancer. Also, this load balancer gives you health check as a very additional benefit. So all this setup, your load balancer, your on top of that, your auto scaling group provides the facility to manage the load in off-peak hours and also saves you cost as well.
Yeah, okay, that's good. So now coming to the second question, just suppose that your EC2 instance crashes unexpectedly. So what kind of troubleshooting approach will you consider here?
Like EC2 crashes. So there would be some application hosted on that EC2 machine. Might be due to high RAM or CPU again. I'm guessing just there can be multiple scenarios depending upon the case. So I would first go to the AWS console and see there are health checks there. Like there are three health checks there. Out of three, if all three are passed, then I'll just log into the server and see what is the RAM and CPU of that particular server. And if that is high, then I'll try to whatever services are running. If it is possible, I'll try to restart them so as to release some CPU and RAM, so that the server would be like in some conditions so that people can use it. But if some other case, if I talk about like the EC2 is has crashed, that we are not able to connect to that particular EC2, we will go to the EC2 console and we will say, I guess definitely there would be the health checks would have failed, either the responsive one or the other two health checks. So it is like we want to be able to connect to that EC2 machine, then we would have to reboot that EC2 machine. So to avoid such cases, what we can do, we can configure alerts like CPU or RAM usage alerts so that it goes beyond 80%, 90%, whatever, depending upon your application. So if it goes beyond that, then we should receive an alert. So we can check it and we can free the CPU or RAM or disk, or we can increase it if required, if our application requires it. So that's my take on this particular scenario. Thank you.
Yeah, okay. So now just suppose that you have one EC2 instance on which your application is running, correct? And your application has to connect to the internet and it has to download something from the internet site, like any of the images you just consider that it has to download, your application has to download, and it's not able to download. So what might be the possible causes here due to which it's not able to download anything from the internet site?
So I'm assuming that if my EC2, if I'm on the EC2 from there, I'm not able to connect to internet. Might be the EC2 it is in like private subnet. Okay, and there would be some misconfiguration with the NAT gateway or the NAT instance, depending upon the case. So either it is NAT gateway which is misconfigured. Like there can be many scenarios. Let us say in the route table of that particular subnet, private subnet, there is no entry for NAT, or might be there's an entry for NAT, but NAT gateway got provision in private subnet itself. So NAT gateway should be in public subnet, and its entry should be in the subnet of private EC2 or the private subnet. Okay, so this thing we need to cross check, and yeah, I guess so. It depends upon the NAT gateway. If it is about internet access from an EC2, uh, yeah, I guess so. This is the case.
Yeah, that's the right answer. Using the help of NAT gateway, you can connect to your private EC2 machine with the internet and you can download anything if you want. Okay, so moving forward to the S3 service, AWS S3 we will be talking about. So just suppose that you have accidentally deleted data from S3 or someone else has deleted and now you have to restore it. So how will you do this part?
For S3, like if data is deleted, if there is one case that I remember, if versioning is enabled in bucket. So if versioning is enabled, then we can recover the data. I'm sure about this because I've done this. It's like when versioning is enabled, so it is like V1, V2, V3, so these kind of versions. So from older versions, we can recover the older data which we have deleted. But if versioning is not enabled for that case, I'm not sure if we are able to like recover the data or not. Might be something with AWS support we can check for AWS backup if it keeps somewhere. But if we enable the AWS versioning while creating the bucket, then we can get the deleted data.
Yeah, okay, that's true. With the help of versioning, you can restore the data whatever you have deleted in the S3 bucket. That gives you a kind of backup and that you can restore. So let's talk about the VPC's side. So how will you connect your on-prem data center with your AWS cloud?
On-prem data center with AWS cloud. So it's like it would be something like VPN. There is VPN site-to-site connection or direct connect. These are two services facilities provided by AWS to connect our AWS Cloud VPC to any on-prem data center. So these are the two services which we can like use.
Yeah, that's true. Okay, so considering the same kind of scenario, so now we are not going getting into the different data center. Just suppose that I have two VPC and two EC2 instances in these two VPC. On one EC2 instance, my front end is running, and on my second EC2 instance, which is in second VPC, my backend service is running for the same application. Now these two needs to communicate, and it has to show the data on the front end side. And if I'm trying to hit, I'm getting that I'm not getting the response from the second application. Like that means it's not able to communicate with each other. So what kind of issues can be there, and how can we fix this?
So it's like we need to establish the connectivity between two VPCs on AWS. Inside a VPC, EC2 machines can communicate with each other. But if we talk about two different VPCs, they are two different networks, even if they are on the same AWS account. So to establish the connectivity between EC2 machines, which are running applications on AWS cloud in different VPCs, we need to enable VPC peering between those two VPCs. From one VPC, we need to initiate the request for VPC pairing, and the other has to accept it. So by this way, and there would be some rules would be added in the route table for this particulars. Like if in VPC A, let us say we have two VPC, VPC A and VPC B. In VPC A, we have to add the route for VPC B, and for VPC B, we have to add the route for VPC A by giving the CIDR ranges of two VPCs respectively, and enable the VPC pairing. One has to initiate, and the second VPC has to accept that VPC request. So this way, EC2 instances will be able to communicate with each other as if they are in the same VPC network.
Okay. Now let's go with one more question with the AWS, and then we will move forward towards the Kubernetes. So I have an application which is running on my EC2 machine, and it has to fetch some of the objects which you can consider as icons which should be available on your web application. And these icons are stored in AWS S3 bucket. But when my application is trying to get the objects from the S3 bucket, it's not able to do. So how can we enable the communication between this application which is running on EC2 to S3 bucket?
Like for fetching objects or establishing connectivity to S3 from an EC2 machine. First, we need to create an IAM role, which is having the permission for S3. We would create an S3 full access role or whatever access, like only read access or write access you want to give or full access. First, we need to create an IAM role with that access. And then inside that EC2 instance, like from console, we can directly attach this IAM policy to this particular EC2. Attach this IAM policy, like go to instance settings, actions, like you can attach the IAM role. You can select that particular IAM role, and there EC2 would be able to communicate with the S3. Okay.
Okay, now let's talk about the Kubernetes. So can you explain the architecture of Kubernetes in just a brief?
In Kubernetes, like we have a master node and we have worker nodes. Okay. And in master node, we have many processes running, like our controller, scheduler, and etcd, that is for backup. The controller plane has many other functions and all those things running. I'm forgetting a bit here. Like there are components, and on worker nodes, actually, there are processes running which have one of them manages like the networking. within a particular node, and other components like I've just forgotten their names, but I'm Cube. There is Cube Proxy. Cube Proxy manages the networking on a particular node. On all the like, let us say there are four worker nodes, so on each worker node there will be one Cube Proxy, and there are other components as well on these worker nodes. So I'm forgetting their names as of now, but I'll surely get back like on this particular. I'll get a touch of this.
Yeah, that's true. So there are components called API server, your scheduler, etcd, and controller, like who controls your job. And then proxy you talked about. So yeah, these are the components you can explain in the architecture. Okay, let's talk about how will you upgrade your cluster, EKS cluster if you have, how will you upgrade this, including your nodes as well?
For EKS cluster, like if we have to do upgrades, before that we have to like manage the ongoing pods running on those particular nodes. So for this, we can like drain the nodes or we have cordon commands. So then all of the nodes which would be on a particular node, we can just upgrade that one. And later on, we can schedule the pods back on this particular node. So this drain and cordon and uncordon commands are used to manage these effectively.
Okay, that's good. So now just suppose I have a application which is running on AKS pod, correct? And there are multiple nodes as well. What I have to do, I have these 10 ports and I want that all these 10 ports should get scheduled over all the nodes which are running so that I can scrap the data. Like I have to deploy this Prometheus, or I can talk about FileBit I have to deploy. And I want that all my pods which are running for your pod, that should be on the all the nodes. So how will you ensure this distribution of pods to the nodes?
Like if we want to schedule the pods equally over the nodes, then we have daemon sets. Like daemon set installs one node, one pod per node. So for logging kind of like as you talked about metric B, so it's used for logging purpose. So for this we can install one pod per node by this daemon set. But for there are another ways as well. One way like NT affinity we can use. If we add the pod NT affinity in the deployment file for that particular uh, like service, whether it is FileBit or whatever, so it would schedule that particular pod, only one pod on a particular node. That is also possible. So these are the two ways I can come up as of now.
Yeah, okay, that's right. You with the help of pod anti-affinity, or if you have to schedule all the pods on all the nodes equally, then you can use this daemon set as well. That way you can deploy and that will work to scrap the data from your nodes. Okay, so moving forward, let's suppose that I have an application which is running on a pod once again, and I have to fetch this application details or application itself from the browser. And in the browser, I want to hit rinkyrathod.com, and this domain should show the application which is running on the pod. So how will you set up for this?
Like if we want to set up domain, or you can say some uh, application should be accessible to the outer world. Yes. So for this, if and also the application is like containerized and is having Kubernetes on top of it. So for this, apart from the deployment files, like that we write for pod, we need to add the service and ingress files as well. The service file would route from ingress to particular pods, and on top of that, we need to write ingress file. In the ingress rules, we can define that from slash go to this particular pod or slash home go to these particular pods. Uh, so these are internal to our cluster, but outside that cluster, what will happen? When we will write this service file and apply it, the service we need to write of type load balancer. So this would create an actual load balancer on AWS cloud. And this AWS cloud will route the request to this particular Ingress. Like ingress controller would be sitting at the entry point of our cluster. So inside our cluster, ingress controller will read the rules from ingress file and it will route accordingly inside the cluster. So these three things need to be set up. Your service files, your ingress files, and that load balancer will get automatically created out of it. Also, you need to install the ingress controller on this particular setup. And on top of that, when we have to set up the domain name, we can add the domain name in the Route 53 and then route that particular thing to this load balancer. So the request from the internet would go to AWS account where this is hosted to that particular domain name. And from Route 53, it will go to load balancer. From load balancer, it will go to your cluster because this load balancer knows where to send the request because this load balancer has been created by the service itself. It sends it to the cluster. So from cluster inside, we have written the rules in ingress. From ingress, it will be routed to the destined port.
Yeah, that's true. It will go up to the ingress, and from ingress, it will go to the identical your services, and from the services, it will go to the pods which are related there. Okay. Now, let's move towards the Terraform. So, suppose I have to create one EC2 machine, and not one EC2 machine. Just suppose I have to create 10 EC2 machine with the same configuration. So, what will you use here?
Like if we have to repeat something, so we can like use count variable inside that resource block. Simply you write a resource block for EC2 machine and inside that resource block you can simply add the line for count and say count equal to the number of times you want to create that particular resource and those many EC2 instances will be created.
Okay. So, just suppose that I have a VPC which is created by someone, you can say manually itself, correct? And now, if I have to create EC2 machine with the help of Terraform, so I have to write the script in Terraform so that it we can provision one EC2 instance. But I have to use the same VPC which is already existing in the AWS, correct? So, how will you ensure this?
Like if we have to use an existing VPC, we need its VPC ID. Okay, so there are two ways. Either you can just go to console, directly copy its VPC ID, and you can directly give the VPC ID in the EC2 resource block. And the second thing that you do not have access to the VPC ID, and this is a vast infrastructure which is going to be created. So you only know that VPC name or only tags. So you have a facility in Terraform which is called data block. When in data block we can fetch the already existing resources by filtering on some details. Like if you know something, you know the name of the VPC, then you tell inside the data block that this is the name. You just go to like AWS and you can filter by this name. So what will happen when we write the data block for this VPC? It will just fetch its VPC ID. We can use this data block to fetch the VPC ID. So these are the two ways, like directly copy or use a data block.
Okay, that's great. With the help of data block, you can fetch any details about any particular resource which is already existing, and that you can utilize further going forward, like data dot and the alias, whatever you have provided, and then the name. So that will give you the details. Okay, so let's talk about you have. Let me just give me 1 second. Yeah, you have one BPC created with the help of Terraform or any other resources you can think of, and someone has deleted that particular resource manually, correct? And now, if you run the Terraform apply once again, so what will happen here? Will this resource will be provisioned once again, or how your pipeline will behave here?
The VP is deleted manually. So if you run the Terraform apply again, so Terraform actually matches the uh, configuration file which is written along with the actual infrastructure that is there on AWS Cloud. So it will match that it needs VPC and on AWS Cloud there is no VPC. So it will try to provision it. It will try to create another VPC. with the same name, same configuration that is there in the configuration file. So it will try to create it.
Okay, now I have one module for the VPC and one module for provisioning EC2 instances. To provision EC2 instances, obviously I will require the VPC ID and security group ID, all these things, correct? So I have to provision BPC and EC2 together. So that means I will be running this Terraform apply command at one time, and I have to provision first BPC and then EC2. I have to pass the output of the first module into the second module so that EC2 module can utilize the BPC ID to provision the EC2 instances. So how will you use this, like passing the, how will you set up this kind of thing, passing output from one module to another module?
Your question itself had the answer in it. You, um, I guess you have unconsciously told the answer itself in the question. So it's like we can pass the output from one module to another module. We define output blocks in a particular module, let us say security group. We can define the output blocks in each module. We can define. So let us say we need security group to be created first, and then we have to create the EC2. Because in EC2 we would be needing the security group. So one thing we can add in EC2, we can add uh, depends upon security group, depends on block. So that EC2 gets created only after security group is done. The second thing, in the security group module, we can write the output blocks, output.tf files, uh, which would output the security group ID of the security group created. And then we can use it as a just like a normal variable in our EC2 module. Like module dot output dot there's a syntax there in Terraform, and the name of that particular security group ID variable that you have named, you can directly use it.
Yeah. Can you explain me the stages what you have written in your Jenkins pipeline to deploy your application or any kind of pipeline what you have written?
In Jenkins, it actually depends upon the kind of application that we are going to provision. If it is simple Java application that we are building, then there would be like first step is definitely checkout. That is by default. It checks out the code. Then second, we would build it. And third, if there are some test cases that we have written, there would be a test. And then last is deployment. So depending upon the type of deployment or setup we have, the cases may vary. I have told you the case for a particular simple Java file.
Okay, so let's come to the Linux. So I'm trying to run my one of the script what I have written. So just you can think of I have written a script for user creation, and while I'm trying to run this script, I'm getting permission denied error. So what kind of steps will you take here to troubleshoot this?
In Linux, if we are getting permission denied error in case of running a script, so might be the user from which you are running that script is not having the like permission to execute that particular script, or the uh, what we say the permissions of that particular script do not have the executable command like 777, these kind of numbers like 4, 2, and 1. 4 is for read, 2 write, and 1 is for execute. So execute should be true if we want to execute that particular file. So we can just change the mode of that particular. So instead of changing all the existing mode, we can just simply write like uh, change mode plus X and then the name of that particular file. So it would plus X means it will add the executable permission on top of existing permissions for that particular file, and then we would be able to execute. Change mode is just that chmod, then plus X, and then the name of that particular file.
Yeah, that's good. So let's go with the last question of this interview. And your Linux server is kind of performing very slow, correct? It has a slow performance. So how will you troubleshoot this slow performance of Linux server? And what all command will you use to troubleshoot?
Like if just like EC2 machine, the here also, if it is performing very slow, might be machine having some load, application load, might be some testing going on by testing name or something, or might be some application might be running normally but having spikes in CPU and RAM usage. So if it we are able to log in, like if it is responsive as of now, we will log into that server. Maybe it is responding slowly, but we can log in. We can check for RAM, CPU usages, disk usages. So we can just check one by one. We can check for RAM by free minus mh. It will give the output, like how much is total RAM, how much is used, how much is free, how much is cache. Everything we get to know. If it is less available, then we can just check what all resources are actually occupying the RAM. I'll just explain the command as well later. Then for CPU, sorry, for disk, we can check df-h. Df-h will give you the disk of root. We need to check for root as well, slash. Like how much is occupied. It should be at least 80%. It should be y- like if it is beyond 80% utilized, then we should look into it. And on top of that, if you want to see the processes which are, and if we find out that CPU and RAM are high, so then we need to identify what all processes which are having the CPU and RAM usage. Then we will use htop command. Okay, in htop command, when you type this command, there would be a UI kind of thing for you. So that would be interactively running UI. There you can sort this output with the like based on the CPU percentage or memory percentage. So then you can identify the process ID. If you want to, if that is a necessary process, you can kill that process, sudo kill then that particular process ID. Or if there is something service, so you can restart, take a restart of that, so it will release some RAM and CPU for that particular moment of time, so that it will cool down a little. So these are the steps that needs to be taken. Or for this, you can set up scripts as well, which and can add it in the cron tab. So like every 15 minutes or every one and half an hour, CPU, RAM, and disk checks should be taken for that particular server. And you can set up SMTP as well. Like then mail is triggered if it is high, so that you can take action before the server actually becomes unresponsive and you get complaints from the customer side. So this can be a measure that can be adopted.
Yeah, that's a great answer. You explained it very well. So yeah, that's all from my side, and thanks for the interview. Let's close this.
Sure.